Hi, and welcome to this week's episode of Art Like Everything Else, the podcast. My name is Simone, and I'm your host for this episode. So, this week we're talking about art and redemption. So, now redemption, according to Merriam-Webster's, redemption is the act, process, or an instance of redeeming, with the word redeeming being serving to offset or compensate for a defect. So, now redemption is a concept that can be found in several religions. It's in Islam, it's in Judaism, it's in Christianity, and like even the concept of it can be found in Buddhism, can like at least sort of be found in Buddhism. So this is a concept that I've always kind of found interesting. So like, who is redemption for? Who actually gets to be redeemed? And so these are the things that I hope to explore using the works of art that I will be discussing today. And so this is the sort of framework that I'm going to be exploring the works of art with for today. I want you to let me know some of your favorite redemption arcs in art below in the comments. And with that being said, let's get started. Now, before I go any further, the art that I will be discussing this episode warrants a trigger warning, and I want to do my due diligence in that regard. So trigger warning for abuse, gaslighting, violence, and discussion of abusive relationships, as well as suicide, or discussions about suicide and mentions of suicide, and domestic violence. Now, the first work of art that we will be discussing is the movie Interview with the Vampire. So this is based on the Anne Rice books that were released in the 1970s. And so this movie was released in 1994. And spoiler warning, because I am going to describe this movie in some pretty good detail. So this movie follows Louis DuPont du Lac, a former Louisiana slave owner turned vampire, as he tells the story of his life to a journalist he met in San Francisco. The journalist's name is Daniel Malloy. Excuse me. And so Louis tells the story of losing his wife in childbirth and how that led him to wandering drunk in the city of New Orleans, and that's where he met Lestat. Lestat turned him into a vampire. Now, while as a vampire, Louis finds that he doesn't actually like it as much as he thought he would, and because he doesn't want to kill humans, so like he actually ends up sustaining himself on animal blood. And Lestat doesn't like this. He wanted somebody who could kind of join him in human, like hunting humans and killing humans, because he actually like really enjoys like hunting and killing people. And so a little later, there's a plague that's kind of happening, going around New Orleans, and Louis finds himself passing by a house with a little girl whose mother kind of just died from the plague. And so like upon entering the house, he kind of finds the little girl, like she's kind of clutching her dead mother. And like when he like touches the girl's shoulder, she turns around and like she hugs him. And then like he actually ends up feeding on the little girl. And then Lestat finds him and he gets so excited. Like he even starts like dancing with like the dead mom corpse, weirdly enough. And then like Louis, who's like ashamed of being caught and of like giving into that urge that he's been trying to fight this entire time, he kind of runs away from the house after he got caught by Lestat. And so he only to find out that when he got back to his home, Lestat actually brought that little girl there, and to kind of like convince Louis to stay and to not leave, he turns the little girl into a vampire. And so Louis loves Claudia like his own, like that's his own daughter. Like they go really close, like they're like even like they're sharing his coffin. And then like she, even after she gets her own coffin, like she'll go to sleep in her own coffin and then wake up and go get in his coffin. Like it's so cute. And then they grow kind of really close. Now, like time passes, and like this little girl, so like in the movie, she looks to be like about 10 or 11. So this little girl, she has the mind of an adult, but she still looks like a 10 or 11-year-old child. And she's like just really frustrated. And so she gets angry and like trying to find out, like to the point where like she's yelling and she's throwing things. She starts trying to like cut her hair. And then it all like grows back. And she gets angry and she's like yelling like, who turned her? She goes to Lestat and Lestat's like, I turned you. And she like actually gets so mad. She like cuts his cheeks. And then it's like kind of after this happens that Claudia just tells Louis that like they should leave Lestat. But like they kind of both know like Lestat won't let them just leave. And so Claudia plans to kill Lestat. She does this by she gets Lestat to drink the blood from these twins, but she poisoned those twins with laudanum, so like essentially making like their blood them dead, but their blood kind of still feels like it's alive. But vampires aren't supposed to drink dead blood because it's supposed to be like poison to them, while Lestat is sort of like delirious and and like just weaker than he usually is. Claudia brings out a kitchen knife that she was hiding, and she like slits his throat. And then Louis, who kind of witnesses all this, is like really shocked and is like, what? But he do still, however, like he goes and he helps Claudia dump Lestat's body in a swamp. And so now Louis and Claudia are planning a trip to go to Europe to like search for other vampires, but they don't know that Lestat actually isn't dead. And actually, right before they're about to leave, he actually ends up showing up and trying to like, y'all not going anywhere type stuff. But to get away, Louis actually throws like this oil lamp at him, and it sets Lestat on fire. And so they kind of assume he's dead a second time. So this kind of gives Louis and Claudia time to escape, and then they travel around Europe and other countries, and they don't really find any vampires. They do end up, when they head to Paris, and they're considering like just going ahead and settling down in Paris, they run into Santiago and Armand, who are two vampires. And now them two, so Armand and Santiago, they kind of invite them to their coven, which is actually like a vampire theater group. And so they put on, like, this vampire theater group kind of puts on horror shows for humans. And so Santiago, while there, like, Santiago kind of reads Louis' mind, and they kind of suspect that, like, him and Claudia kind of did something to Lestat. Armand is telling Louis to, like, that Claudia gotta go. Like, Claudia is in danger being over here. And so, like, because, like, Louis actually starts spending a lot of time with Armand because Louis wants to learn more about being a vampire, Claudia starts to kind of sense some distance between them, and Louis is actually starting to consider like traveling with Armand. And so Claudia is like, she wants a companion, so somebody to be there with her. And so Louis obliges and actually makes her her own companion. And so it was, however, though, it was like after this, the three of them, so the new companion, who I believe is named Madeline, Claudia, and Louis all kind of go, and they end up getting abducted by the vampire coven, and they're punished for Lestat's murder. So Claudia and her companion are locked in a chamber, and then like the sun is showing on them, and so they get burnt by sunlight. And then Louis is locked in an iron coffin, and he's like sentenced to starve to death. And now, like, while Armand does not save Claudia, and he doesn't really do anything to try to save Claudia, he does go and save Louis. And so, like, after Louis, when he gets out of the coffin, he goes to look for Claudia. He sees what happened to Claudia, and after finding out what happened to Claudia, he gets revenge by setting all of the vampires on fire inside the theater. And so he did this actually, so he does do this like right before sunrise, so that like if they were to try to escape, they wouldn't be able to really get away. So Armand, though, like helps Louis to escape the sun coming up after this, and he tries to convince Louis to stay with him and to be by his side. Louis, however, though, is like, no, you ain't do nothing to help Claudia. Like, why would I stay with you? So years pass, and Louis never gets over Claudia. Like, that weighs heavy on his little vampire heart. They were really close. Like, they were like father and daughter for real. And so like it makes sense that like he never really got over her death. And so like he's traveling the world alone, and then one year he kind of just travels back to New Orleans. He travels back to New Orleans, where he's from, and he comes upon like a rundown Lestat. Like, he's dingy, he's dirty looking, he's feeding on rats in an abandoned house. And so Lestat's like, he actually is apologetic about turning Claudia, and he tries to like convince Louis to return to being his companion. But Louis like, nah, I'm good, bro. Nah, I'm not doing that. And so like this actually kind of concludes the interview with the journalist. And so like, however though, like even though like after telling this entire sad story, the journalist is really just like, hey, so vampires exist? Turn me into a vampire. I want to be a vampire. Let me be a vampire. Type shit. Type stuff. And Louis like, did you not hear a word I just said? My life has been terrible ever since I became a vampire. I have known nothing but suffering. What do you mean you want to be a vampire? And so Louis gets mad and like scares him away because he's like, you didn't even listen to none of the stuff I was talking about. You don't understand nothing I was talking about. Get out of here. And so like the journalist starts trying to escape, and like while driving away to get away from Louis, he actually ends up getting attacked by Lestat. And then like Lestat like feeds on him, and then Lestat goes back to looking like his little beautiful fabulous self. And then Lestat actually ends up offering to turn Daniel into a vampire. And then they kind of just sort of keep driving, and like the movie sort of just ends there. And so now Louis in the movie, he was actually valued for his ability to hold on to his humanity despite living as the undead. It was a feature that kind of made him intriguing to Lestat and Armand. It was one of the things that I believe even Louis found redeeming about himself, at least for a little while, which is actually eerily similar to our next work of art. Now, our next work of art is actually the Interview with the Vampire TV series. So this series was actually released in 2022. Excuse me, and it's also based off of the Anne Rice books. Now, it wasn't like a one-to-one adaptation, but it is also still very good. So I'm kind of going to combine both of the seasons. So 2 seasons are out right now. The final episode of this last season actually just aired on the 30th, June 30th. So yeah, so I'm going to talk about that series. It's a really good series. I suggest you go watch it. I believe it is worth all of the hype. In this series, we follow Louis de Pontdulac, who is a Creole man in New Orleans who owns some brothels. Now he is the son and grandson of some failed sugar farmers. And like, because all the money kind of went out that way, all the money kind of like, his family lost a lot of money in that. And like he was forced to like turn to like opening brothels so that like his family and his mom could kind of stay afloat. And so he kind of takes care of his family with the money he makes doing the work he does there. Now, Louis meets Lestat in a few different times. He meets him at one of the brothels. He meets him at a poker game, and then also, like they have some relations, and they are almost pretty much like a little couple. They spend time together. They like hanging out with each other. Lestat meets Louis' family. It was in this episode though that I'm talking about episode 1, season 1, I believe. Louis loses his younger brother. Actually, Louis loses his younger brother, who was not doing well mentally. He kind of seemed to have like some delusions. I believe it is said he has schizophrenia. But like he was kind of suffering some delusions and was like devoutly religious. And like I believe that kind of led to him taking his own life. And that event happening destroyed Louis. He lost his brother, who he grew up with, of course, who he took care of, who he felt like, who he looked to, because like he was just like this rock for him. And him losing his brother kind of was like the nail in the coffin that kind of led him to kind of deciding to become a vampire. And so in becoming a vampire, he joins Lestat as his companion. He continues working in like this brothel business since it's a nightlife business and he can't really go out in the sun anymore. He continues to do all that. He in this like doing all this business, remember he's a Creole man, and so like this is like 1930s New Orleans, so like Jim Crow and like the separation of race is still very prevalent. Like there are whites only establishments, colored only establishments, and so like Louis, thinking that this newfound power that he gets from being a vampire was kind of going to help him to transcend this race issue that he was experiencing, but it doesn't actually. And he keeps running into that, like he's being treated as less than despite holding all of this power because he's a vampire. And it is because as a vampire that like he kind of comes across all these things. He ends up doing something that kind of sets off a riot, and it destroys like this black neighborhood, and like it's him when he's walking down and seeing the aftermath of his actions. It's when he hears the cries of a little girl who is starting to kind of like pass out in like this burning building. He runs in and he saves her, and he brings her to Lestat in their home. And so I'm going to kind of combine both seasons and trying to like keep everything lined up. I just found out that Louis actually begs Lestat to like make this little girl who looks to be about 14, he makes her a vampire, to make her a vampire so that like she can be saved, because like she's dying from smoke inhalation and like burns all over her body. And then Lestat originally was just like, I can't do that, that's against the vampire code, like you're not supposed to turn children. But Louis like, please, I'll stay with you, I promise I'll stay with you if you just turn her, she can be our daughter. And then like Lestat agrees, he relents, and he turns Claudia into a vampire. Claudia and Louis then kind of become thick as thieves. They like this, and they get really close. However, though, same issue kind of happens like it did in the movie. Claudia kind of notices as like, hey, as I'm getting older, I am still in the body of a child. This is frustrating. I don't like this. And like things just sort of like start happening, and it keeps like frustrating her because like she's kind of being treated like a child essentially despite not being a child. And so like she decides to run away. She runs away, and she encounters some terrible things, and Louis is distraught. Louis is like not leaving the house. He just stays in, kind of cooped in, like reading and like scouring the newspapers because he's trying to find out where Claudia is. And one day Claudia kind of comes back, and it is when Claudia comes back and she's like, hey, I've been doing some reading, I think we should go and try to find other vampires. Lestat gets angry and kind of like, no, you don't get to come back and just demand we go and do other stuff. And he actually attacks Claudia, and Louis ain't having it. Louis goes, and an altercation kind of happens, and Louis and Lestat are going at it. And actually like Lestat like flies up really, really high into the sky. They didn't even know he could fly actually. Lestat flies up really, really high into the sky to like where like airplanes and stuff be at, and he's holding Louis by like his shirt, and then he drops Louis. And like knowing Louis a vampire, he's not gonna die from like the impact, and so like Louis is just in unimaginable pain. And then we don't see Lestat for a while. He kind of goes away. And Louis is kind of left to like heal, and Claudia kind of helps him and is like there for him and helping him to get back on his feet, and like bringing him like food so that like he can still eat, and like she's essentially just kind of taking care of him. Then like Lestat does sort of come back, and he's kind of only back on like a temporary basis. Claudia still really wants to go though, and like Louis like, I'm probably not gonna go nowhere, but I encourage you to like go and do what you need to do. Like there's a train coming, and like she's like, all right, she's tries to go and escape. Lestat's not having that though, and so Lestat like finds her and sort of like makes her come back essentially. And then that happens, and then we go on to, after that happens, Claudia's like, hey yo, we gotta kill him. Like he can't keep us here. We want to go, we want to leave, but he ain't letting us leave, so we gotta get him up out of here. And Claudia's just like, hey, leave it to me. I'll take care of everything. You open your heart back up to him. Let him believe he's back for good and that like everything's okay. I'm gonna take care of everything. So Claudia and Louis don't know that like Lestat actually has another vampire in the city who has been spying like on them mentally, so that like she can pretty much tell Lestat like what they're planning. And so they think that no one knows what's happening. But Lestat actually does know that they're planning to try to get rid of him. And it is when they actually do try to get rid of him with the laudanum, you almost assume it's going to be one of the twins again, because there's another set of twins in this. And Louis like, yeah, I saved you this one. And then Lestat's like, I ain't gonna drink from it. I know what y'all planning. I got a vamp spy. And then the vamp spy is revealed. But then Louis like shocked, and he was like, what? Oh my god. And then like Lestat thinking he pulled one over on them. Claudia's like, actually, I already knew you had somebody following me. That's why I wasn't sharing no real info with Louis. And Lestat actually still ended up being poisoned regardless, because he didn't poison the twin. He poisoned the very first person that Lestat ended up attacking. So like Lestat already had that blood in his system for a minute actually. And like he starts to get delirious and weak. Then he get his neck slit. Also, old girl, that vampire, she also dies. Her body's burned, but they don't burn his body. They just put his body in a trunk and then put it on the curb, and so that it's taken to the dump. And then we proceed to season 2, where they're traveling around Europe trying to find other vampires. They come across some, but they don't seem like fully formed or fully like kind of like cognizant. Like they're sickly, and they say it's because they're like feeding on bad blood. But anyways, those vampires turn out not to be good. They end up going to Paris. They settle in Paris because it's a city of art. It's a booming. It's about to, as Louis put it, is about to like blow up and like get really big. And Louis, and so yeah, they both kind of decide to stay there. Louis runs into Armand. Armand is like, hey, we got a coven here, come visit our stuff. And so Louis takes Claudia to the little vampire theater company, and then they go and see the show. And then Claudia's like, oh my gosh, I want to join. Like, this is amazing, because she's been looking for a coven, because she really wants to be a part of a vampire family and be a part of a group. And then she eventually does get to join, and Louis and Armand kind of become a couple, and like they be going off and doing their own thing. Claudia joins the coven. She becomes part of it. They kind of start treating her like crap. They start kind of treating her like crap. And then after that, she she's like, all right, actually, I don't want to do this no more. And then, like, but when she goes to Louis, Louis kind of like, you wanted this. Like, I did this for you. Like, I'm here for you. And she's just like, oh, you, like, pretty much like, you chose another companion over me. Like, it was supposed to be me and you, but you chose Armand over me. And then sort of like, when that happens, they kind of they get into it. They're upset with each other. Claudia ends up finding someone who can be her companion, and she asks Louis to turn her, because he's like, I want to have a companion. I want somebody just for me. And she gets that companion. Louis agrees. Well, at first they try to get Armand to do it, but Armand's like, I don't know how to do this. And then Claudia is able to get her companion. And then, so once she gets that, then it's actually found out, like, oh no, they've been betrayed. Armand was forced to turn them over to the coven, and like, Lestat's not dead, and Lestat is back, and now they're going on trial for killing Lestat. Now, while on trial, they end up doing, like, they're put on trial, and like, there's these little cartoons, and Lestat's talking about all the stuff that they did, like exaggerating and like trying to make it out as though Claudia and Louis are these evil no good doers, that like were just terrible and manipulative and all of that, and kind of completely ignoring that a lot of what they did was out of self-defense to the abuse they were kind of going through with him. And so, yeah, pretty much that they went on trial, and it's so wild that like, Lestat admits to knowing the vampire law and turning Claudia, who was a child anyway, and also into throwing Louis from thousands of feet in the air, and purposely to cause him harm. And like, the people are just kind of like just kind of like sweeping that under the rug to like indict Claudia and Louis on what it is that they're on trial for. And like, Louis and Claudia is not even allowed to defend themselves. Like, whenever they try to speak, the judges, kind of like the other vampires, like do this like mental like fogging, where they like force them to like disorient them so they can't speak. Their ankles are slit so they can't even like run away. And then when the sentencing part comes up, Louis is Claudia and Madeline, the new fledgling, are sentenced to death. And then Louis is sentenced to banishment. And so, when after that happens, Louis is thrown into a coffin that's filled with rocks, so that like he'll stay there and potentially like starve to death. And then Claudia and Madeline are on stage, sort of like cradling each other, and then like the sun kind of comes down and burns them to a crisp. And it is terrible. Like, oh my gosh, it's so gruesome. After this happens, it seems like at least a few days pass. Louis is kind of going insane from hunger and starvation. Like, he's screaming and he's so disoriented. But Armand ends up switching out his body with another coffin, and so helping Louis to be able to escape. And when Louis gets out, because he felt like, he didn't see what they do to Claudia, but he felt it sort of like mentally, like he knew Claudia was gone. And so like, he decided to get revenge, and he plots revenge, and he sets the theater on fire, and he makes sure that no one was able to escape, really. or at least he made sure to get as many of those vampires as possible. And then like he's with Armand, like he told Armand, was like, hey, don't be there because I'm about to make something happen. And then Armand ends up going with him to see Lestat, and like instead of killing Lestat, well, he was like, I'm here to kill you, and then Lestat was like, I'm too strong for you. And then Louis was like, all right, then I'm going to hurt you another way, and decides to say, he's like, I'm going to be with him for the rest of our life. And so like, you won't ever have access to me ever again. And then, so yeah, they kind of, Armand and him go off, but they just later kind of realized that like, it was actually Lestat who did all the mind control of the entire audience to say banishment for Louis, and that like Armand has kind of been lying this whole time, and that like he absolutely knew what was supposed to be happening, and like he actually helped plan all of that was happening. And so like Claudia dying was his fault, at least partially his fault. Like he knew exactly what was happening, like, and he did nothing to prevent it. And so Louis kind of like in current day is like upset, and like they go at it, they have a little fight or a little tussle. Present day, yeah, Daniel actually makes the book called Interview with the Vampire. It sold a bunch of copies, and he is out promoting it and stuff. And then that kind of wraps up the series, really. Like there's some major events and stuff that I didn't talk about. I kind of do want you to go check out the show if you haven't. I do really think it's that good. It's on AMC Plus, and I believe it's going to be on Netflix later this year. But yeah, it's very interesting that like Lestat was able to, on this trial, admit to breaking the vampire laws multiple times, and still be seen as like the good guy by the audience, like in like the redemption in that, like, so yeah, I found it to be incredibly fascinating. So now redemption is an interesting thing to consider, especially as it comes to the portrayal in both of these works, because like I do think it can be really up to your interpretation. So kind of like what my interpretation, at least when I watched it, like redemption in the movie was kind of interesting to me, how like Louis was seen and like valued almost for his ability to stay tied to his humanity, a humanity granted to him because he was a white man in this case, because like they consider it that like because he didn't harm people after he became a vampire, at least not intentionally, he did his best to avoid those like choosing to feast and eat and satiate himself on animals was supposed to be seen as him sort of like staying in touch with his humanity. But that man was a slave owner. How humane can you be when you own people? Like, he was supposed to be seen as like this good, idyllic person almost, who like only turned to the darkness that is vampirism because he lost his wife and his child in childbirth. And you weren't a good person, but because you valued those relationships and like you sort of like felt like you were suffering as a result of those relationships, those were like, that connection to humanity was kind of seen as like being the ultimate thing. And then like your relationship with treating Claudia like a daughter was seen as like a redemptive quality because you were connected to your humanity in that way, but you weren't really all that humane. And so it's like, it's interesting what is allowed to be redeemed and what seemed as redeemable in the movie, and like why he was considered redeemable. And like in the show, again, Lestat on the trial admits to like harming both Louis and Claudia, and nothing's done. Like, nothing's done. It's like he's able to harm them and be like, I'm sorry that I harmed you so much. And the audience kind of like, okay, all right, moving on. And it's like, why is that seen as redeemable? Like, why was it okay for him to do all of that harm? Like, why didn't that make you all second guess that, like, maybe what is being said here doesn't actually account or show us the entire story of what's happening? Because if he's admitted to doing that and he's apologizing for it, why else would they want to run away or try to destroy him so that they can get away? And so, like, it was just interesting, especially when you then consider, like, who gets to be redeemed. So again, Louis in the movie, a white man. Lestat in the show, a white man. It's so interesting that, like, all of the bad that was done was sort of like erased because of this good thing that it was seen that they did, or something that they was seen as good or supposed to be like at least better than that. They were essentially like forgiven, or like it was sort of like ignored, and they were almost seen as like redeemable characters. Especially because, like, if you look online, it was so interesting how very quickly some people kind of tagged on to the idea that Louis might have been like an unreliable narrator, in which case, like, all of the events that kind of showed where, like, where we didn't see the entire picture, what was revealed to us didn't actually change anything. Like, even if Louis did beg Lestat to turn Claudia was a child. Lestat knew that turning a child was against the vampire law, and he did it anyway. Because Louis didn't know that was against the vampire law. And yes, Louis was crying and really like, please, 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 and begging him. Lestat still could have said no. Lestat is like far, far older than Louis. And he has more power in that relationship. Like, he could have said no. He was not manipulated by Louis into turning Claudia. But it's interesting that just that, like, that information was enough for people to be like, that makes it okay for all that, like, Louis, all that Lestat did. Because they were also excusing all of the harm that Lestat inflicted upon Louis, when all of that entire fight started because Lestat attacked Claudia. Like, Louis going forth and just be like, nah, we're just gonna fight about it then, doesn't really negate the fact that Lestat attacked Claudia. Louis was defending his daughter. And so a fight ensued. And yes, Louis at that point had enough. He was just like, no, you attacked my child. Why would I not be like, no, I'm about to beat the crap out of you, and then I'm going to leave. And that was kind of what set Lestat off. And where he decided to, like, I'm going to throw you up, like, take you all the way up, and then, like, toss you so that, like, you can't leave. Like, you will be physically immobile. So it's like, it's just interesting, like, who gets to be redeemed, because for whatever reason, just that little information made everything Lestat did okay in a few people's eyes, at least, that I saw. And then so, like, another thing that it made me think about this, like, watching this show and this movie kind of made me think about, is kind of just like, what is the point of redemption? If redemption seems to only ever serve those who have the power, or those who are at least in the most power, what is the point? Consider it from, like, I keep thinking about it from the audience point of view. And so like the audience watching this play, all they see, like they don't know that, I'm assuming they don't know that these are actual like real vampires. You don't know that that child, that person that looks 14 years old, you don't know that that is an adult woman in the child's body. So you see this little black girl up there, and like they're saying that this she attempted to kill this grown white man, and then it is found out that like, yes, he did attack her, yes, he did, like, and he harmed the other person who was like her would-be father. But your first, like, when it's like time to sentence her, you still like death. Like, you sentence this child to death after hearing everything that happened. And like during the show too, it was like Claudia said something like, can't I cry and say I'm sorry too? Because Lestat got to cry and apologize for the harm he inflicted on Louis, and that was accepted. But like when she got up to and was like, can't I cry and apologize too? Can I be like, I'm sorry, and like it be I get redeemed as well? It simply was not allowed for her. And I think it's so interesting who gets to be redeemed in situations like this, because, and then like, just not even just this, but in all kinds of, like, even in real life situations, like we have people in the media, people in like the music industry, people who always seem to have like these large amounts of power and sit and like sometimes hold multiple privileges, inflicting harm, and it's supposed to be like, oh, they get to go donate money somewhere and be redeemed. They get to say like, oh, I go to church now and be redeemed. They get to do something nice. They get to be like, I'm sorry, and be redeemed. And it's supposed to be treated almost as if all of that stuff, all of that harm that they cause, just doesn't exist anymore. And it honestly doesn't make sense to me. Now, usually, so what I'm sort of doing, like with this podcast show / series, is sort of exploring all the ways that like the very nature of existing as a person, of existing as a human, is in art. And so like I'm sort of exploring works of art that might reflect like those feelings, those experiences, those philosophies, concepts, and etc. But honestly, with this episode, I'm sort of struggling. I don't know if the concept of redemption should exist, honestly. And so I want to ask you all, can redemption too be in art? In art like everything else? Let me know what you think. Now, last but certainly not least, this week's awe moment. For those new to the show, the awe moment is simply art that made me think for the week. And so now for this week, I actually wanted to read an excerpt from a poem by Morgan Harper Nichols. The poem is called Let July Be July. And so I won't be reading the entire poem. I'm just going to be reading the 7th and 8th stanza, and it reads as follows. Let July be July. Let August be August, and let yourself just be. Even in the uncertainty, you don't have to fix everything. You don't have to solve everything. And you can still find peace and grow in the wild of changing things. Now, I do think the entire poem is really, really beautiful. But I thought those two stanzas kind of really stood out to me, because kind of like just being, I think, is the only reality we can all sort of count on. So it's just like, just let yourself be, even in the uncertainty. Because honestly, something that like, I think a way that I could probably tie this into what we were just talking about in this episode, the kind of just letting yourself be, I do think, Personally, I don't think redemption should be something that people seek. In fact, I remember reading an article on Psychology Today by I forget what country. They're a person of color and they're from this war-torn country, and they are talking about how like we shouldn't seek to look for benefits after like there have been like just bouts of harm, like even if on both sides, like if there has been harm taking place, like maybe we shouldn't seek to find a way to benefit or to find the benefit in these terrible situations, essentially. And I thought that was really poignant. Like, why should we seek to be redeemed if we've done terrible things or if we've caused harm in some way? Like, why do you want to not feel what it is that you did? Just being, even in the uncertainty, you don't have to fix everything and you don't have to solve everything. And I do believe it is still possible to find peace even if you don't feel redeemed for the harm you might have caused other people. You can choose to grow and do better. You can choose to change, grow, and do better, and apologize and not feel redeemed and still potentially find peace, I believe. But it's so interesting because I also there was another article about redemption on the Psychology Today, and so that one was by a white man, and it kind of brings back to what I was talking about, how it's so interesting. He was kind of talking about all the ways in which yes, redemption is possible, yes, it is this is how you can be redeemed type stuff, and in the article he's talking about yeah, I did this great harm to somebody and they've not been able to forgive me, and so I went searching for a way to kind of be redeemed. And it's you did something bad to somebody, you shouldn't get to feel good about it. I'm sorry, but just be, even in that uncertainty, you don't have to fix everything. But yeah, it's just so interesting, the people and the privileges that a lot of people have, those who value and seek redemption often tend to hold the most privilege and want to feel good about that privilege and the ability that they wield to hold and abuse others. And that's a whole nother tangent. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being. Have a good rest of your day. Bye.